hadn't even unzipped her backpack when a girl with lip gloss and a perfect uniform leaned over and whispered, "Black girls don't make it here." She smiled like it was kindness, like it was a fact, like it was already over. The hallways smelled like wax floors and lavender hand soap. Her shoes echoed differently here, polished tile instead of scuffed linoleum. Students moved in clusters, backpacks slung low, voices casual, as if this building belonged to them before they'd even earned it. She walked alone. 14, new. Uniform, freshly ironed but a shade off. Her blazer fit fine, but not like theirs. Her loafers were secondhand, but cleaned to perfection. She wore her hair in a neat puff, edges brushed, earrings small. Her nails were bare, her face open. She didn't smile much, not yet. Teachers greeted the others by name, the kind of casual warmth that came from seeing the same faces since second grade. She received a nod, maybe a glance, but not much else. In first period, the teacher mispronounced her name twice, then shrugged and said, "I'll get it eventually." The girl nodded, even though it wasn't okay. She just didn't want to start her first morning correcting someone with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach their eyes. By lunch, the whispers had started. They weren't cruel, just sharp, just quiet enough to feel it. "Is she on scholarship? She's from the city, I think." "No, she transferred in. My mom saw her mom at orientation." "Maybe she'll stay for a year." "Maybe." She sat at the edge of the cafeteria, table to herself, notebook open beside her tray. She didn't eat much, just nibbled around the noise. A girl in a perfect skirt with glossy lips walked past her table, leaned slightly, and said it like it was weather. "Black girls don't make it here. They drop out or transfer." Then she smiled, a soft, empty kind of smile, the kind that lands in your chest like a stone and doesn't move. The girl blinked, closed her notebook, and nodded again. She had heard things like that before, on buses, in waiting rooms, in the subtext of teacher conferences, in the way people said your name with a question mark, in the way they talked about who thrived and who was better off elsewhere. She walked to her next class in silence, sat in the back, listened harder than she had to, took notes in margins no one else filled. She didn't raise her hand that day. She didn't need to, because some people arrive quietly and stay longer than anyone expects. The cafeteria felt bigger every day, not in size, but in distance. Each table held its own circle, and none of them opened. She sat near the windows with her lunch unpacked carefully. Sandwich, apple slices, folded napkin, every motion quiet, deliberate. She chewed slowly, eyes down, the kind of posture that made her invisible without looking like she was hiding. The other students passed her by without looking. Or worse, they did look, then looked through her, as if she were a substitute in the frame. Background noise, someone to be edited out when the photo was taken. She spoke when spoken to, but rarely beyond that. Not because she didn't have anything to say, but because she had learned early on that the room rarely wanted to hear it. Teachers called on familiar names, the same 3 kids in every class, even when her hand was raised, even when her answers were right on the page. Once, after a group project, a boy presented her work like it was his. She watched him recite the words she had written and nodded like it didn't matter. Her counselor called her in during third period one afternoon, not for anything urgent, just to check in. The woman offered a kind smile and a folder with notes inside. She asked how things were going. If the classes felt too intense, if she had considered lightening the load, she suggested maybe switching out of honors bio, maybe dropping advanced math until she adjusted socially. She didn't raise her voice, didn't ask why no one else had been pulled aside for getting an A- on one quiz. She just nodded, said thank you, said she would think about it. She didn't think about it. She wrote about it. That night, like most nights, she opened her journal and wrote down everything she couldn't say out loud. The girl who rolled her eyes when she answered too quickly. The teacher who told her she was surprisingly articulate. The boy who asked if she had transferred in from somewhere rough. She wrote it all down in long, even lines, names, words, dates. She didn't call it revenge. She called it evidence. She read more, stayed later in the library when no one noticed, read ahead in every class, took notes in the margins, her handwriting sharp and exact. At home, she stayed quiet too, Her mother asked how school was. She said, "Fine." Her mother looked at her and knew that wasn't true, but didn't press. Instead, she made tea, set it beside her daughter's backpack, kissed her forehead, and left the room. She went to bed early, woke up early, put her uniform on without help, tied her shoes in silence. She watched everything. She remembered everything. And while no one clapped when she walked into a room, she walked in anyway, every single day. Not to prove anything, but because she already knew who she was, the world just hadn't caught up yet. It started in small ways. Her name at the top of the test scores posted near the classroom door, the quiet tap on her desk from a teacher handing back a paper marked with a near-perfect grade. The extra credit project she completed even though she was already ahead. She didn't raise her hand to announce it. She didn't stay after class to ask for recognition. She just did the work, better than most. Cleaner, sharper, but quieter too. Some students noticed. A few whispered that she must be cheating, that no one did that well without help. Someone asked if she had a tutor. Another joked that her parents must write her papers. She heard them, but never flinched. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them keep trying to shrink what they refuse to understand. One of her essay-son analysis of a novel others struggled to finish was passed around in the English department. She never knew until one teacher slipped and mentioned it. Said something about how impressive her thinking was. Especially coming from you. She tilted her head slightly but didn't respond. She had learned not to. The history teacher who once smiled warmly at her now gave back her essays with narrowed eyes. One afternoon he kept her after class, closed the door, and held up her latest assignment. "I need to ask," he said, "did someone help you with this?" She looked at him directly. "No." He nodded, lips pressed tight. "It's just very advanced." She didn't say thank you, because it wasn't a compliment. It was a suspicion wrapped in praise. She walked out without another word. Another teacher once leaned over her desk after a class presentation and said she was surprisingly articulate. The words were meant to land like a gift, but they thudded at her feet. She had spoken clearly. With confidence, with structure, she had prepared, practiced, she had spoken like someone who knew exactly what she was saying, and yet it was surprising. She went home and wrote about it, not in anger, in detail. She logged the moments like chapters. Names, dates, words used, tone of voice. She cataloged it all, not for vengeance, for clarity. Because while others lived in the comfort of not noticing, she had trained herself to never forget. Her grades kept climbing. Teachers began to call her work gifted. They talked about her behind closed doors. One even asked her to represent the class in an academic competition. But still, no one invited her to the study groups. No one asked her to sit with them at lunch. She remained where she had always been, at the edge of every room, watching. And still, she worked, because the truth wasn't in their praise or their suspicion. It wasn't in the teacher's glance or the girl's whisper. It was in the stack of papers she kept at home, the ones no one else saw, full of drafts, notes, questions, underlines, proof that she had built this herself. So she kept building, kept reading, kept rising. Not loudly, just undeniably. The final year arrived like a breath held too long. Senior banners filled the halls. Photos were pinned to bulletin boards with glittered borders. Acceptance letters were posted in glass cases next to college logos. Students moved through the building louder now, bolder, counting down the days and measuring their worth by what schools were willing to take them. She moved the same as always, quiet, focused, a little taller maybe, not in height, but in how she carried herself. Her walk had changed, more stillness in her steps, less apology in her posture. She sat in the same seats, at the same lunch table alone, now with earbuds in. Her notebooks were stacked neatly. She still answered questions when no one else raised their hand. She still stayed late in the library. But now, something had shifted around her. A faint whisper, a tilt in how people looked at her. They had begun to notice, though most didn't know exactly why. Until the list came out. GPA rankings were posted like they always were, laminated and tacked to the guidance office window. Students clustered around it, pressing too close, searching for their names in hope or panic. She waited until the hallway cleared. When she walked past, her name was the first line, Valedictorian. There were no balloons, No celebration, no crowd waiting to congratulate her, just her name printed in bold, black ink. First, above the ones who had laughed, above the ones who had whispered, above the ones who still didn't know how to look her in the eye. The silence that followed was louder than applause. The girls who had once rolled their eyes and called her too quiet now stood at a distance, pretending to scroll through their phones. One of them, the same one who had once said black girls don't last here, approached her locker days later. She smiled tight and said, "You're lucky they let you in." The words fell out casually, as if they were meant to sound supportive, as if the entire 4 years had been kindness and not resistance. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She zipped her backpack and walked to class. Her steps didn't rush, her face didn't change. She had been carrying that weight for years, and now that it had lifted, she had no reason to hand it back. Teachers were kinder now. Smiles came quicker. One even asked her to mentor underclassmen. Another pulled her aside and said he always knew she was destined for something, but they had not said that before. They had not said that when she sat alone, or when she was accused of plagiarism, or when her hand stayed raised for 10 minutes without being called on. Now her name was printed, framed, celebrated in whispers that had once been doubts. She did not gloat. She studied harder. The speech was coming. She knew that, but she wasn't writing it for the ones clapping now. She was writing it for the version of herself who sat alone that first day, hands folded tight, head high, heart full. The one who stayed. The folding chairs creaked beneath restless legs. The sun pressed down in warm waves over press gowns and pinned caps. Parents fanned themselves with programs and clutched phones in one hand, ready to capture the moment they'd been waiting for. Students whispered, adjusted chords, rolled their eyes at cheesy jokes from the stage. Everything felt celebratory, predictable, and perfectly rehearsed. Until her name was called. The principal tapped the microphone, adjusted his glasses, and read it like he hadn't practiced it out loud until that morning. "Our valedictorian," he said, pausing with just enough drama to draw heads up, "is Maya Renee Clark." The courtyard hushed. It wasn't disbelief. Not for everyone. Some had seen it coming. A few teachers nodded like it made sense now. But others blinked, turned to one another, mouths open just slightly as if trying to catch a name that floated too far above them. She stood slowly, shoulders square, gown crisp, white against brown skin that caught the sunlight like it was made for this moment. No stumbling, no glance around for confirmation. She walked to the stage without hesitation, holding her speech in one hand and the years behind her in the other. No one clapped louder than her mother. Sitting in the front row, dressed in navy with a single tear streaking her cheek, she pressed both hands over her heart and smiled without restraint. Around her, others followed, a wave of applause rising just a second too late. Maya stepped to the podium, adjusted the mic, took one slow breath. Then she spoke. She didn't talk about the GPA or the test scores or the club she joined or the scholarship she earned. She didn't list her accomplishments like receipts. She didn't need to. She let her presence speak first. Her voice was steady, soft but sharp. She thanked her teachers, even the ones who doubted her. She thanked her classmates, even the ones who never sat beside her. She thanked her mother for every ride, every packed lunch, every moment she hadn't noticed at the time but felt now like a lifeline. Then she paused, looked out at the sea of white gowns and floral-printed dresses, found the faces that had turned away from her in lunchrooms and classrooms, let the silence sit for a moment. And then she said it. To every girl who's been told she doesn't belong, speak louder and stay longer. No music played, no cheer erupted. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then hands began to come together, scattered, unsure, but growing. A few students stood. A teacher reached for a tissue. Her mother stood too, not clapping, but holding her breath, her pride, her girl. Maya stepped back from the mic, folded her speech with care, and returned to her seat without looking around. She didn't need to see their faces. She'd already said what she came to say, and they would hear it every time another girl like her walked into that school and didn't flinch. The sun began to lower behind the gym roof as the last of the chairs scraped across the courtyard. The air smelled like cut grass and perfume, and the chatter rolled like soft thunder through the crowd. Families gathered in clumps for photos, students tossed caps into the air even though they were warned not to, and someone yelled for everyone to look this way and smile. She stood quietly with her mother, both of them holding on to each other, not like it was a goodbye, but like it was the quiet close of something they'd already outgrown. Her mother fixed her daughter's tassel, smoothing the edges of her gown with the same hands that once packed PBJs and folded laundry late at night while homework covered the table. She whispered something only Maya heard, and Maya nodded, eyes glassy but steady. A teacher came over next, one of the few who had truly seen her from the start. She had tears on her cheeks and both hands on Maya's shoulders. She didn't say much, just smiled and shook her head like she was proud but not surprised. Across the courtyard, the girl who once told her she wouldn't make it stood near the water station, sipping slowly, glancing around but never toward Maya. Her friends posed for a photo without her. Maya didn't wave. She didn't gloat. She didn't walk over. She didn't need to. Instead, she hugged one more teacher, posed for one last photo with her mother, and walked toward the gate as the sky shifted to gold. She didn't turn around. Not once. She didn't need a final look to feel what had changed. She had already carried the weight of that school for 4 years. She had earned the right to set it down now. In the fall, she left for college. But her name stayed behind. A few months after graduation, the school unveiled a new plaque in the academic wing, a row of names engraved in brass beneath the title Valedictorians of Excellence. Her name was first on the updated list. Clean, bold, unapologetically placed. Students walked past it every day. Most didn't pause, but some did. A freshman girl once stopped in front of it, binder hugged close to her chest, and just stared. She wore box braids and a cardigan too big for her frame. She didn't take a photo. She didn't say anything out loud, but she reached out once and touched the edge of the plaque before walking on. It wasn't the plaque that made Maya important. It wasn't the title or the medal or even the speech. It was the space she made by refusing to disappear, by not shrinking, by staying, by taking up the kind of quiet space no one thought she had the right to occupy, and that space didn't close when she left. It remained. Not because they finally saw her, but because she never needed them to.